Welcome everybody. Today we're doing an interview with Megan Stewart from Mint Property Management. Now Megan's business is a specialist property management business specialising only in property management, which means no sales, no buying for people. She's 100% focused on servicing landlords with homes in Metro Melbourne. Thank you so much for joining me today, Megan. We really appreciate the time and the knowledge that you're going to share with us today.
You are very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Now, the purpose for our meeting today is, I'm sure that you're getting this a lot and the questions are coming through to us from our clients or from our prospective clients who are wanting to buy a property but feel a little bit nervous with everything that's happening with COVID right now. And people are wondering, should they move forward with their plans to invest or should they put them on hold? Now, there's a few elements of assessing whether or not now's a good time or a bad time for people to be buying. And today I want to focus on purely the property management side of things. So we're looking forward to diving into this and getting some of the very, very common things that are on people's minds answered from an expert who's on the ground.
Great.
So first, cab off the rank. This is a question we're getting asked all the time. People are fearful about purchasing an investment property and then potentially not getting a tenant. Could you tell me a little bit about what's happening on the ground in regards to advertising and letting new properties that are coming to the market?
Okay, so there certainly has been an increase in available properties on the market, and part of that is that there are renters who are reassessing their leasing circumstances, and there is, of course, the natural and normal churn that we do see at this time of year. If you owned an apartment in the 3000 postcode, you would be correct that you'd be a pretty worried investor. As at this morning, there are 3,100 properties available in the 3000 postcode.
Wow.
The volume there is just massive. But that directly relates to no international students, no tourists, no business people travelling. And so all of the Airbnbs are now on the market looking for a slice of the long-term leasing. If you move a little bit further out from that central CBD, we are still seeing demand. Definitely, people are on the move. And one of the positives is that people who are looking, they actually do need to move. So the tire kicking element, they're staying at home, which is fantastic. And the people who are looking for somewhere to move have set dates, plans, they know what they need.
Could you give us an indication of why people might need to be moving, just so that people have a little bit of context?
Sure. I have leased two properties recently, one in Hawthorn and one in Glen Iris. We had a 12 days on market for Glen Iris with a couple of applications that we did decline, and our successful applicant is a self-employed electrician, so a good contact to have as well. And they've been living further out of the city, and most of his work is now consolidating through the central city and Melbourne metro area, so they needed to move back into the city. Another example would be someone who has transferred with work from an office on the far side closer into the CBD, so rather than a big commute and using public transport, which a lot of people still aren't at the moment, they decided to move, and a 12-month lease gives them that flexibility to change that role and keep their job as well, so super important.
Okay. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you and ask that question. Was there something more going to say in regards to how quickly properties are leasing at the moment?
So the two examples that I just talked about, we had a 12 days on market and a 14 days on market. That's a little bit longer than our normal result. We're usually closer to sort of the 9 days on market. Part of that is that in terms of organising inspections for people, there are more people wanting private inspections, so it's a little bit around that timing for them. And of course, each inspection, each open that we can run, we're making those for a longer period of time so that people can come to a good pace and still feel comfortable. So we're not cutting down the processes, but the actual time to get people through to see something is taking a bit longer, so that changes it. Our average days on market really hasn't increased too much, because that's literally our number one focus when a property is here and available. And we do those private inspections for people. But what I am seeing is an increase in the volume of property available. So you do need to have your property priced correctly. You do need to have that good presentation. And of course, we need to have the availability to make sure that we can get people through the front door.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into one of the other questions that are on people's mind, and that is, are people having to reduce their rent if they've had a tenant that was, say, paying $400 per week for one apartment in, say, Melbourne, for example? Are they needing to reduce their rent to attract a new tenant, or can they lease the property out at the same amount that they've recently been achieving?
Sure. So it does vary a little bit property to property and based on the type of property. So if the one bedroom in Melbourne is in Melbourne East and it's by Monash University, traditionally your audience tend to be a student. So you may very well need to reduce your rent to attract somebody else into that type of environment. We are seeing properties sort of $400 a week and under, of which there aren't really too many available. Their price point is not really changing. It is that 400 to sort of 600 price bracket where people are feeling more comfortable to put forward an offer and to actually try and negotiate an outcome. We will always encourage people to do that and to put forward their offer with their application, because then we can assess it as a whole before we talk to our client about it. And if you've got in mind where that person is sitting with their offer, you can have a much better and stronger discussion around getting the good outcome on the pricing.
Now, with
overall,
that's okay. With the laws around what we can and can't do with fees and advertising for a certain amount, in that you have 3 interested parties, you've encouraged them all to put in an application with their offer of rent, and there's one outstanding applicant or 2 outstanding applicants, but their price difference is, say, they're $30 per week difference in price. Legally, able to go back to the other tenants who you would happily sign off on having as tenants and let them know that you've received a higher offer, and would they like to amend what they're prepared to offer for rent? Legally, are you allowed to do that?
You can go back and advise people what you have actually received. We deliberately don't solicit a higher offer, because that it then becomes a bidding war, and I personally, as an agent, have a problem with that when you advertise at one price and solicit a bit more. But if we do receive a higher offer and we have two strong applications, we will go back to that second application and say, here's what we've received. It is completely up to you whether or not you would like to change your offer. And if they're a strong applicant, we will present that to our clients and let them make that decision. My recommendation in the current market is that you are looking at the applicant's profile and taking that into consideration a little bit more so than looking at a $10 to $15 a week higher rent, because stability, I think, the next 12 to 18 to 24 months is really going to be important. And let's face it, a $10 a week difference is $500 a year. So if you get stability in terms of your tenancy, I think it's worth the sacrifice of the $500 a year to know that you can breathe and relax in the process a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, thinking about the long term, sometimes people are really focused on saving a little bit of money up front.
Yeah.
of the bigger picture and how much money they may lose with it or miss out on down the track. So that's a really good point. I think, are you finding that there are certain properties or areas, aside from the obvious apartment oversupply in Melbourne CBD, which is postcode that you spoke about earlier, that there are different areas or property types that are suffering more than others?
One of the things that has become quite noticeable in the last 3 to 4 weeks in particular, so through that June period, is one-bedroom apartments. So particularly through the Hawthorn, Brunswick, those kind of city fringe areas, people who had been forced to work from home for a number of weeks, they are out and they are looking for a study or a study nook or an extra bedroom or a bigger balcony, and they are actively looking for that. So the number of one-bedroom apartments is starting to change. The volume is definitely starting to increase, because the people who were shut inside them for weeks have gone, no, I need my own space. So that's showing up as a pretty strong trend.
Yeah, we've actually spoken about that a little bit last year in the bioadvocacy sector. This was before COVID obviously happened, but we participated with doing some media coverage on people's buying habits and whether or not their criteria for property has changed with, life changing. And even before COVID, there was, there's a lot more client briefs that include a space for mum or dad or both parents to be working from home. So that come up. I would say in 80% of all my home buyer briefs, people are putting it as a priority for them to have somewhere they can actually do their work from home. On average, you mentioned that there's roughly a 14-day vacancy for a well-priced, well-presented property that doesn't have any objections. What are you finding for properties that may be inferior, whether or not it's presentation, location, asset type for the area? What's happening with those types of properties?
Well, they are doing one of two things. Number one, they are starting to lead the charge for some of the local area pricing to be amended down. And I could easily highlight sort of Brunswick as probably a quite strong leader in that field, where there are some buildings that really don't offer a whole lot of value to their residents, that people are really starting to just sort of shy away from. So we are starting to see that price point move. Brunswick is a good example.
Newer developments, developments?
So more around some of those developments, I would say that would be between 2.5 years old, where a lot of them were put up there without sort of any additional space, or maybe a smaller development where there's only one lift in the building for 30 apartments type thing. Those types of properties where when you have restrictions, life gets a little bit harder with some of those things. So there are those properties who they are leading the charge to put pricing pressure on for the rest of the available stock. And the second thing is that we are seeing a hesitancy, which is not good, which can be good or bad depending on the quality of the property, but we are seeing a hesitancy through some of the people to actually move on price, which means that their days on market are really starting to blow out, which is creating that sense of oversupply. Generally, if we are putting a property on the market and we're just not seeing a good response, we've sat down with our client before we've listed it and said, right, if we don't see what we want to see within 7 days, here's what we are going to recommend based on the suburb. how does that work for you? We tweak those dates and times and the price from there. So we actually have that set out and structured and in place so that we can move to meet that expectation.
Now, I know that happened with one of our clients who you're looking after for us recently, where both you and I had provided an estimate of rental, and because the area was actually a very, very tightly held area, the owner, both of our clients wanted to put, just try to put a little bit of a premium on it. And this is right when COVID actually started to unfold.
Yeah.
And it sat for, I think, a week or two. And then once they listed it at the right price, it leased instantly, didn't it, with 2 applications from memory?
Yes, yeah. And look, we will always go for best and highest. And even in a market where there is a bit of pressure on, we will go for best and highest. But that's where having that that discussion and that agreement prior is, yeah, absolutely, we will start best and highest. But if we don't see anything and if we're not getting the right response, we need to be able to move quickly. Because with any of the advertising, you start at number 1 and you move slowly down, and where there's more volume in those postcodes, you disappear off page 1 pretty damn quickly.
All right, so to dot point that for our viewers and listeners, so for those people who have an apartment or a house or a property that's sitting on the market not renting, Megan's advice or suggestion is that you look at pricing really closely and to be careful about holding out for that higher price, because the longer you're holding out, the more competition that we're seeing come onto the market. So if everybody's holding out for that price, the stock is not turning over, and so we're getting a bigger build-up, and in the end, that's going to drive prices even further down. So in order to lease your property quickly, I think you need to be examining what's happening. If you're not getting the right response, make a move early, make a move ahead of the pack, and you might end up actually getting more in rent by coming down than if you waited with the rest of the pack and then everybody dropped at the same time, because then everybody gets to their threshold, whether it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks vacancy, and instead of $40 per week rent drop, you're seeing $100 a week rent drop because everybody's racing to the bottom to get a tenant.
Yeah, that is a beautiful summary. Thank you.
Okay, so the other thing that, this came up really early in COVID, and I think the conversation around this has really died down a lot because it actually became a non-event, even though we were all pretty hyped up and concerned about what might unfold. But what is the percentage, and not just yourself, but across the board, because I know networking with property managers all over Australia, roughly what's the percentage of tenants who have stopped paying their rent or have negotiated a reduction in their rent due to COVID?
Yeah, look, surprisingly low across the board, and you're right, I do certainly stay in touch with a lot of my industry colleagues, and everybody was kind of bracing for quite a big response, and it just it hasn't appeared. So we've made a concerted effort to contact a number of times, sort of on a monthly basis, all of our tenants, and just check in with them and ask them how they're going and really make sure everyone's sort of doing okay, more of a care call. And that also then gives them the opportunity to raise the question around when they need, without them having to specifically ask, to phone and ask a question. In terms of our rent roll, we have one that is currently in Consumer Affairs, and that's going to go to mediation. And unfortunately, the tenant rejected the owner's rent reduction offer, so we are heading to mediation on that. And we have 4 or 5 where we've offered a combination of a reduction and deferral and extended payment terms, that sort of thing. In terms of percentage, if I put a number on that, thinking wider industry, I'm going to say no more than 5%. The feedback is it's been really low. What I can't answer is, does that mean that people haven't been putting their hand up, or does that mean that the financial support systems that have been put in place are actually getting to the right people? We're not too sure of that at the moment.
I mean, we saw very, very, very few people try to take advantage of the situation and capitalise on it, but it was very, very few people. By and large, it seems that during this whole crisis, humans have really banded together in so many ways and have just done the right thing, which is great to see. And I think as a testament to the property management industry, who had to move so quickly to these changes and create, we were working in a grey area for so long, waiting for the government to confirm prices and things like that. And to the industry's testament, you guys have just done an amazing job at managing the process for both landlords and tenants to make sure that people were safe and looked after, but also that nobody was taking advantage. So I've got always have a lot of respect for the hard work that you guys do, but through this process, you guys and accountants and essential workers work harder than ever. So.
Look, and it has been a really challenging time, from the fact that in the middle of all of this angst, we actually had a suite of law changes that came through because of COVID, so through the COVID omnibus. Now, those changes are in place through to the 29th of September. Unless changed, they will automatically be repealed. And that does include things like the eviction moratorium, no rent increases, and change in process, where everything is now steered through consumer affairs, and VCAT's pretty much out of the picture in its traditional format. So it introduces new challenges, but it also is super confusing. So it's tough for us to get our head around the bureaucracy behind it, but it's even tougher for our clients and for the owners and renters to know where to go and who to ask. So it has been extremely difficult for people to get that clarity, and I'm really looking forward to the 29th of September, where we can hopefully return to a modicum of normality in terms of those processes.
As professionals in our field who've been doing this for a really long time, I dare say you, similarly to me, have probably said, I just don't know, more times in the last months than you have in your entire career.
Yeah, more times than I can count. Yeah, and I have started to use the sentence of, so my crystal ball is actually just not working.
It's literally day by day, week by week at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you had many people terminate their rental agreements due to a change in their circumstances resulting from COVID?
No.
Wow.
No. So we have had we've had a couple of lease breaks, but they haven't been cited under the terms of COVID, and both of those lease breaks that the renters have actually honoured the costs that they would normally pay because they've taken advantage. So we've actually entered into a bit of a negotiation to help both parties through that process, basically. Had they not wanted to honour their lease costs, there would have been nothing that either I or the property owners could do about that because of the change in laws. But because they weren't directly stemming from that, then we went forward in the normal manner. The number of people who are vacating, I don't see within the overall industry is increasing an awful lot. There's not a sharp spike in people saying, that's it, I need to move because of a change in my circumstances. And I feel that a lot of the people who are on the move, those are their normal occurrences, basically.
Okay.
You know, we're not, that really the only difference is in terms of the international students, because they do make up a pretty healthy percentage of leasing within Melbourne. And of course, there aren't any interstate people moving through transfers and that sort of thing. So that changes the makeup of the people who move. But it doesn't really, it's not that people are suddenly going, no, I can't do this. I'm not going to rent anywhere. I'm moving home, or I'm, you know, heading back to family. We're not seeing that, and I'm not anecdotally hearing a lot of evidence that that's the case. So
it's all been really quite surprising, hasn't it? Like the whole.
It has, very much so. Yeah.
We're all bracing ourselves for what really, really, really bad worst case scenarios, and both the buying, selling side and the property management side, it just hasn't actually eventuated.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I do feel that there will be further change in terms of the number of available properties on the market, and perhaps how that market price point sits as we head through into the end of September. But again, this is a grey area. It's a big unknown. It's going to be a I don't know until we get there factor. But I do feel that if we're on track to see the higher percentage of government support finish, then we may certainly see just some higher jitters, I think, in terms of what the decisions that renters are going to make, and that may have an impact. But again, if you have a good quality product, it's presented well, and we are priced to meet the market, there is always the right person out there to match to the property.
Yeah. Well, I think before we wrap up, a good one to end on today is just to talk about the process at the moment of how you're going about conducting your open for inspection. So what's the process for tenants wanting to inspect properties during COVID?
Okay, so we are offering both open for inspections and private inspections. And with the open for inspections, we do have a maximum number. So we are registering everybody who wants to attend. And we have a maximum number for the time frame of the open for inspection. We are not taking prospective renters to properties where a tenant has not yet vacated.
Okay.
We need to respect that does make people extremely uncomfortable. So what we are doing is we are coordinating to literally be able to do that on the day following that they vacate, so that we can minimise any vacancy period. But we do need to respect people's wishes and their sense of comfort through that.
Yeah.
We're also, of course, in the postcodes that are locked down. We can take people through vacant properties, but that needs to be on a private inspection basis only. Yeah. So we're allowing time slots for people for those particular properties. And we're in touch with the REIV and getting the updates from them often as to if and when anything shifts and changes. And of course, you know, I've never used so much hand sanitizer in my life. So we have the gloves and the hand sanitizer and all of those things. So you don't get through the front door without a squirt of hand sanitizer. And of course, we have everybody's details recorded as part of that registration process. So, you know, worst case scenario, we are at any stage able to find anyone who's come to view a property. We're following the health regulations in terms of cleaning surfaces, sanitizers, all those sorts of things, and keeping an eye on postcodes and which ones are changing. Yeah. So it's a moving feast.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think I would just want to probably pull out the key highlights from our discussion today.
Right.
who are thinking about buying a property to lease out, or perhaps have some property already and they're curious to know how to handle this situation. I've pulled out a few of the really, I think, the things that are really important for people to bear in mind. So when leasing out a property, pay attention to the security that the tenant is offering in terms of job security and longevity of
absolutely
the amount that they're offering to pay for rent. Act quickly on pricing. If you're not getting a result, if you're not seeing applications come through the door, and this goes for any market, act really quickly. I think 7 days is more than enough to know whether or not your property is received well by the public and if you've priced it right or need an adjustment. So just quickly, when buying a property, think about how the tenants may be able to utilise the space to work from home. If you're tossing up between two options, perhaps consider the option that gives a tenant more flexibility for working arrangements. I didn't begin with you on this one, but we'll have a quick answer from you on this. We usually tell all of our clients to always account for a 4-week rental vacancy every single year in their portfolio. It doesn't always happen. You can have a tenant stay for 7 years. Always wise to financially account for that. And usually there's always like a 2-week vacancy when you buy a property and then lease. That process often takes 2 weeks. Say for people to allow as a rental vacancy in this market so that they can ensure they have enough financial buffer behind them?
Look, I am still talking to people about that 4 weeks calendar month amount as their buffer. I haven't extended that because we're not seeing prolonged vacancies within our client base. I think that 4 weeks is a fantastic piece of advice for anybody, because even if you don't use that during that 12-month period, you then do have some funds to go towards property maintenance and improvements. So I haven't changed it, but I would be extremely keen to see everybody have at least that as the ongoing buffer.
Fantastic. And I guess for those people who are concerned about potentially having less rent than they might otherwise in a different environment, the offset to that is our extremely low interest rates at the moment. So I think where we might lose a little bit of money on the rent, a lot of people have now moved into cash flow positive territory because we've had such a reduction in interest rates, which by all accounts appear to be going to be remaining the same for several years from now. So if the cash flows work and you can account for that buffer and you've got risk management processes in place, then there's probably no need or reason to continue to sit on the fence, wait and see what happens, because I guess this could go on for 18 months. So I think it's something you've got to draw a line in the sand and move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a wise piece of feedback, really. People cannot make a decision for a very long period of time, and that then becomes the habit.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today, Megan. We will pop your details below the video, and if anybody wants to get in touch with you, we'll have your details there. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, and we look forward to talking.
You're welcome. It was lovely. It was great to catch up with you.
Thanks, Megan. Talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.